lost.
It doesn't really matter. And
sorry, recording started late. Just want to say that for the God. I'm
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. And as far as validation goes, well, if it's not so much about whether because well, validation it's good that you can confer with the source on whether what you have put into visual matter can be accepted. But if there are problems, it's not enough to get back yes or no response because to be honest, I wouldn't care checking on whether I forgot to put I forgot to follow a particular convention, because we are not very good with dealing with that, and even the software that we use well might not know it. So these are just the things that need to be kept in mind if you follow that route. And I just assumed that we use BibTeX because for that notation, some demonstrations can be, of course, written that show that we can be robust and deal with just different sets of conventions. I think it's important to demonstrate this to people who might be interested in using that notation, because nobody wants to be put in a straitjacket and nobody read, and let's be honest, nobody reads through specifications. What people are good at, they can follow general guidelines, and from your description, it's clear to me what you want, but at some point you have to put a stop to formalisms and to form, and you have to be liberal. That's all I just wanted to say. And if that and I can think of several use cases to demonstrate that how to build in robustness and how to deal with different conventions. But for that to happen, I need a data set. And now this is why I'm a bit confused, because if things are now moving to RDF, then this will be a bit difficult. But at some point, if you can come up with metadata samples, then I can deal with the fuzzy aspects.
That's very interesting. Thank you for that, Günther. I mean, in this, what I've been putting together, what I call Edgar notation, just to have a funny name, because everything's about Edgar, obviously. All that does is it takes, it explains in one block how the next block is formatted. Just does it once for that. So I think what would be really nice if we make it really clear, and I thought I've done that on the other pages now. You guys haven't seen it, I think. What is required and what is optional. Then I don't have the resources to implement RDF now, visual method. But I think that it can be a useful thing for the future. But if we quite simply put in author equals last name, comma, followed by first name, comma, followed by middle names, delimited by comma, and delimited by period between author names, or whatever. If we can find a way to say that, it would be great if the publishing software uses it. We can't count on it.
I would, yes, and I would frame it as a suggestion. So there are strict rules. So we need to separate the strict rules that have to be followed, otherwise things can't be processed, and then suggestions. Because even with your suggestion of delimiting author names by a dot, I see that there are problems, because sometimes initials, because if you think about initials, then the scheme might break, but there are ways to make it more flexible. And then, of course, also it depends on the databases that people use and where the names come from. And I don't think that people would want to to be would want to clean to change their citation database just to follow the convention. But as I said, there are a set of reasonable conventions, so there is there are reasonable ways to write author names, and a mechanism needs to be, or architecture needs to be in place that can deal with this convention. This is, from a coding point, not, I think, doable. And then, of course, there is the other aspect that if you want to be robust, yeah, in the long term, you can think about how you can have correction heuristics that consult databases. For instance, if an algorithm, or if a parser, whatever you call it, chokes on reading a list of names and it doesn't know, well, where does a name begin and start, you can still do some cross referencing perhaps with a name database. So, but this is not strictly necessary. I'm just saying that one should expect and deal with different conventions. And well, if this is interesting to you, then I can demonstrate how to do it, but only in BibTeX, because I can't deal with RDF in addition. So
no one can.
okay, well, that's good to know. But I mean, I've done a lot of text processing, and so I can absolutely do it. And I really need samples. So if you can manage to give me a few samples. Oh, and by the way, also written in different conventions, because that thing it's to be robust. And I know I have some samples on my own.
But we can't have samples before we have the specs.
Well, you already.
Well, I mean, one thing is, I would really like it if we can go through. I sent the link in chat. This what I call Edgar notation. I'm sure.
Well,
but and just to see if you guys agree with the kind of explanations for the format there. But then also, I have a side question that's very important. If we put this also in RDF, other than, I mean, first of all, is there a benefit that the data will be stored in a clearer form? And is there also another benefit? Or are we just, there's just no point?
Well, as far as I'm concerned, it's pretty clear to me what you want, reading the Edgar notation, and but RDF, that's a whole set of. I'm not really qualified to say anything about RDF. I haven't worked with it extensively, and I'm not really comfortable with it, to be honest.
Before Mark, just Peter, are you semantic web aware or used or?
Well, I've looked at some RDF stuff, and it seems a little bit on the verbose side, and it's going to be intimidating for people to look at. And I think we could come up with something that's closer to the human side of the equation, and that would be more fitting with the visual meta approach.
Yes.
You can certainly take your visual meta, convert it into RDF, but I think that belongs more on the back end and not on the front end. So I'd defer RDF conversion to the tooling and go for something that's going to be good. Frankly, RDF is probably a bit of a fad. A lot of the systems I've seen for it are locked into the Java language. Support on the JavaScript side isn't as strong. Some languages are good with it, some aren't. And certainly a lot of semantic web people, particularly in the description logic area, all locked into Java object-oriented programming mindsets. So if you go to the description logics homepage, you'll see all the major reasoners are Java apps. And if you're not in the Java world, and frankly, most hosting servers are no longer in a Java world, you're never going to be able to deploy them. and it makes it maddening and frustrating. There are a couple attempts now to come up with stripped down reasoners that will run in JavaScript, but they could be using any notation other than RDF. I really don't see the advantage in it, other than just confusing people and muddling things and making potential implementers of the system think, oh my God, I've got to go wrap my head around all this legacy Java code that I don't necessarily know how to use.
Okay, you have made a big point.
Documentation kind of sucks on the RDF side.
Yeah, yeah. All right, Mark, you have your little cartoon.
Okay, rant off.
But that was a useful rant, Peter.
No, I'd agree. I think Peter's made a very good point there. I was just sort of sorry. I'm just stepping back to the point that Gunther was making, and which you sort of responded on. I think having a sort of test now doesn't mean that we're trying to write the final test document. I think it's that the ability to formalize it, that, you know, to put some reality to our words will be massively helped. And it will mean going through a number of iterations of this. But I think, you know, the point where it becomes real is we said, right, I put this in this end of the process and I get this out. And we haven't really quite done that yet. Notwithstanding all the work you've done in authoring things. Because I think that exercise will help in actually pointing up where the hidden sort of hang points are, you know, where things sort of get caught up. Going back to just picking up on the later points and how we got to the RDF thing. I mean, this came about this morning because David was saying, well, and we were talking about this thing of having, you know, response to things and effectively link types, and they're saying, well, you know, that logic has all been worked out, and it's been worked out in the linked data sphere. As Peter rightly says, and this is the sort of concern I always have, is the overlap between the very small number of people who understand how that works and the wider human community is vanishingly small. And that is problematic. And that's why we don't see more adoption of these things. I don't think anyone argues that they're bad. They're just insanely complicated and not approachable. And if people have put, you know, half the effort they put into some of the parsers into just making a sort of human-friendly front end to them, I suspect the whole thing would have got a lot more traction. So I think there is a lot of mileage in being open to the idea of being able to push stuff off into RDF as a way of letting the machines go figure out what they need to do. But we certainly need at the top level something. And the other thing that springs to mind in terms of doing some use cases is actually, well, what is it? If I'm writing an academic paper, it's sort of clear that the sort of things I want to put in the visual meta. If I'm doing some other sort of paper, does that map across? Not necessarily. So in other words, what is our sort of meta set of things that we want the top level wrapper to have, aside from how we want people to format it in a way that, you know, is reasonably robust? Because again, I couldn't agree more with Gunther. My experience is, you know, if people can get it wrong, we will get it wrong. I certainly as prone to that as anyone, not least of which because we don't like reading documentation. So we just stick in something hoping it'll try. And often it does. And actually that causes half the problem, because it would almost be easier if things failed, because eventually, you know, we'd learn to do it, as it were, the right way. But that's not the world we live in.
Yeah, absolutely. So guys, yeah, Gunther.
Yeah, that's true. I just wanted to add that so if things don't fail, so because I know what you're alluding to, because then there are quite big surprises. So that's why if you have mechanisms for robustness in place, then there needs to be an explanation on what has been assumed. So what the Visual Meta Reader really did, and so this is one of the things that that I was thinking about, and this is why it's yes. So if it, I mean. So it's not a problem, for instance, if something is not formatted according to an expectation, then the software could still try to use a different heuristic, but of course it wouldn't need to explain when it interprets the field what it has assumed. And so if you had, for instance, a website where you put in the vision meta, like in this notation that Frode is showing us, and it would, for instance, pass the authors, and things work, even though there are some corrections have been in place. There needs to be at least, I don't know, some, so you highlight some vision feedback to the user that, oh well, this wasn't quite framed, this wasn't quite written in the conventional way, but I could make something useful of it, and here is what I came up with, so that you have kind of an explanation. And I think that could solve the problem, because what I hate is that if the restrictions are too severe and the system jokes on some minor detail. So I think it would be quite good to have lots of flexibility and robustness, but to have an explanation on the side too.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So the thing, there's a couple of things here. Number one is it should probably say what the producing software is in the same block, because that becomes kind of the ID for what this is. Because you can't necessarily think that specific reader software will understand year equals time, minutes, blah, blah, blah. You know, this is human writing, right? Unless there's a specific computer way of writing what these different things mean, right?
I just remember there was one other, quickly throw this in, something else I meant to mention when I put my hand up earlier was the fact that another aspect of writing, sort of doing this exploratory use case stuff, is exploring whether it's actually solving a problem. Because if I go back to the Genesis, so the early talks about this, and one of the ideas, well, this might actually help. This might be useful to publishers who might see it as a good way of getting cleaner data, and for instance, not having to post-process inbound academic documents for sake of argument. So that's one of the things that we should be looking at. So, you know, does the reality of where we've got to now actually reflect that? Because if it doesn't, then, you know, that sort of potential adoption upside isn't there. So even without having the whole thing formally implemented, I think we can begin to explore those things.
Yeah, I mean, guys, the key is just, what is this document? That is the thing, to cite the document. Everything else is extra gravy, right? So if we could walk through this together, it would be really, really useful. First of all, you know, BibTeX has at book, at article, and so on. We're kind of subverting that here. But what's the best way of saying that this bit is about this bit?
Well, if you were doing it in BibTeX notation, actually, you know, all these at book and things, it starts at sign name, open top level curly bracket wrapper. And then inside that, you have a list, a comma delimited list of keyword equals and a value. And sometimes it's done in curly brackets, sometimes in straight quotes. So you could just treat, you could almost, another way of doing it is just almost treat it as a BibTeX type, if you know, if you didn't want to stretch that notation. In other words, the parsers could deal with it, because what that at book or at article does is it tells something, or this is my understanding of it, it tells the BibTeX parser, doesn't tell it how to parse it, it actually tells it what fields should be in there. So it allows it to check compliance. It also helps things like reference managers to put the right glob of data from one of the key value pairs into the right part of that system's database. So it's kind of a hint, it's saying the stuff in here, you should expect to find the following. And it means on the outbound end, if you're putting it in, some of these systems will turn around and say, aha, you know, you didn't put a URL in, or you didn't put the number of pages or whatever. So,
Right.
but broadly, all those things are just a wrap around a set of key value pairs.
Okay, so here's an example without.
Also, I think the interpretation of some of the fields varies depending upon which wrapper it's in. So
Yep.
a couple of the fields might have a different meaning if it's in a book versus an in proceedings. So it might change the final end user output label associated with the field.
Yeah, and to be helpful, that BibTeX really sort of seemed to have lost a bit of steam by the time the internet came along. So that's when Peter was just saying, you know, different things mean different terms, instead of embracing it and just adding to it. So all sorts of stuff is basically, I suspect, to make it easier for the existing era of reference managers and the like, people have just pushed one thing into another thing using the data type as a sort of kludge.
Right, so the only thing a Visual Meta must have is the intro bit, versioning, cite this document, and end. Those are the only required. And they are described in here with, excuse me, in the structure overview, required, gold standard, optional, and all of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I'm asking you guys now is, in order for there to be a block that is essentially, that is 100% Visual Meta, but it has this explanation ahead of it, how should that be formatted in the document? What should this bit say? And what should this bit say? Do you think?
When you say this bit, were we supposed to be looking at a screen?
Sorry, yes. So here is a Visual Meta document, right? So what you have to have in Visual Meta is you have to have at Visual Meta starts, you have to have at Visual Meta end, then you need inside that a version control thing, just say what version of Visual Meta you're using, because it may change in the future. And then you have a BibTeX bit, that's it.
Mm-hmm.
That's the minimum standard you need. So what I'm saying is that in addition to that, I have this bit of text here, which I'm calling Edgar notation, and that's entirely up to change it, just to be a bit provocative, which has two halves. First half is, this is what the fields mean, and then what the fields actually are. So this should be exactly the same as this one above. It's just that here it is put in a very strict way. This could be just a dump of whatever Visual Meta they have on their server. But if for someone who's producing Visual Meta in their software from scratch, like Author or a new publisher with a new document, this is the stuff they should show, right? So my question to you guys is, how should this be framed so that it makes sense that this is referring to what's in here?
I'm sorry, I have to leave.
That's okay, Gunther. Thank you very much for coming by today.
Take care,
yeah,
Gunnar. See you next time.
see
Well,
you next time.
bombshell.
And yeah, as I said, if you have some samples, whenever, take your time, please send them to me, and I'll do some experiments with them.
Will do. Thanks, Gunther.
Okay, well then, take care. Bye.
So I saw, Peter, that you used where, which makes sense in programming terms. I have what you have here as extra bits, but can we just figure out basic labels for this? Actually, you know what? Let me just be really clear. Is that awful?
So you've just edited the page on the live page, have you, of this?
I haven't
Yeah, good.
updated it. But what okay, I'll update it. It's the one called Edgar notation, right?
No, I'm sorry. I only asked because I'm not seeing, if you are sharing your screen, I'm not seeing it. So
I am sharing. Can you guys not see my screen?
I see it.
Okay.
Okay, no, I've obviously, I'll go and sort myself out then. Lost.
Don't worry, you can also see it on the Edgar notation page, but
Yeah, yeah.
can we be as human as having at describe fields for citing this document, and next one at to cite this document?
Ah,
Or is that evil?
Field descriptions would be cleaner. It just seems a little too wordy.
I agree. But I think,
Minutes.
but should we have this break here in between those? I'm not sure how we should make this seem like this relates to this only.
well, you could
Yeah.
nest it in one sort of, I mean, in terms of curly brackets, so that a parser, because it'll look ahead, go through the characters, and it's looking for the, it looks for the sort of balanced closing bracket, and then it knows that everything inside there. You know, that's how, that's my understanding, is how everything is picked apart.
It's basically a question of whether we want to employ tag minimization or not.
What do
But that
you
was
mean?
one of the things that SGML introduced, was the idea of, that was when we started getting the first paragraph would automatically close the paragraph. The new paragraph would close the paragraph before, instead of having a balanced begin paragraph, end paragraph tag, which is okay until you get to deeply nested things like LaTeX sectioning, which is absolutely nightmarish, because a given section is implicitly ended by the beginning of another section at the same level, or the beginning of a new section at any higher level. So you actually have to build in logic, when I was doing my LaTeX preprocessor, to recognize every other possible level at each step in order to see whether you were closing out something or not. And it made the processing side a bit of a nightmare. But if you're keeping a relatively flat structure nesting wise, then it kind of makes sense, sort of like going from the back of the document, finding the visual meta end, and then tracking backwards.
But guys, just, okay, just to make it simpler, what is wrong with the way it looks now?
Fields to cite this document seems confusing.
And I think your curly brackets the wrong way around, but that's getting in the weeds.
No, that's important, actually.
And the opening bracket was bold and the closing bracket wasn't. So you have to make sure you have the same typographic treatment of both brackets. So bold that bottom one, that'll make it better.
No, the bold is for you guys just now.
Oh,
You know, to show what I've changed.
So I think if you're staying inside the sort of BibTeX sort of notation, that your description wants to be the value of a BibTeX key pair, is a suggestion. That might say it's harder to read, but it's sort of, so what that means is everything inside field descriptions, or book here, all that stuff is the contents of one key pair field. So if you were to look at the bit below where it says author equals Manuel Alberto, and I would put some sort of delimiter around that field. That's what we'll do with this text block.
Yeah, but no, hang on. This is BibTeX.
No, that is not valid BibTeX, I don't believe, because how do you don't, I don't think a line break is enough to tell the BibTeX parser. What you normally have is each of those lines would have a comma at the end, at minimum. And normally the value, the stuff to the right-hand side of the equals has either curly brackets or square or plain double quotes around it. And there may be other conventions I've not come across, but I say that simply because if I've left any of those commas or things out, BibTeX parsers seem to get very unhappy.
Okay, so I'm going to click on this page and I'm going to click the export citation. Okay, so here are the commas you talked about.
Yep. So the top bit is, so what you've got there is you've got what's the type, which is in proceedings. The next bit up to the comma on the first line is the key that is used in LaTeX for, and probably other systems, for tying up references in the body text of a document. So when it's doing the referencing part, it says, oh right, so when it says site 1 2 3, it goes and looks for that code. That's what that does. But you'll see there are a couple of styles. You will see both the curly bracket style here. Some other people will put just square double quotes, not typographic quotes, but square double quotes where those curly brackets are, in terms of, so it could say author Millard, author equals open quotes Millard, comma Dave. The more frustrating thing is there seem to be two non-intersecting tribes, some of whom write first name, last name, so they write the name literally as read on the page normally, and as opposed to the other, which does last name, comma, first name. And you also had to have a convention for, Dr. Whatnot the third, people whose Vanda something, but whether that's in a
I know.
this is non-trivial. The point is you need to know that, because if you just trample over the top of it by saying it's not important, then it's a derailment.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying it is absolutely stupefying that this is so complicated.
Oh, and let me give you another beautiful edge case. When I was an undergrad, we had a professor, and everyone referred to him as Dean Anderson, and everyone assumed that he was the dean, but it turns out Dean was just his first name.
Major.
And it took like 2 semesters before I figured out what was going on there. But when he wrote it down, someone would assume the dean was the title, and it was just Anderson, and no one knew what the first name was associated with Anderson because he was the dean.
Yes. Right. So, guys, let's do a useful thing. Let's just look at this dates. So I'm saying that this book was published on the 2nd of June at 4:25 in the morning, 2010. A lot of BibTeX will only have the year or the month and year. That's fine. But how can I, up here under, where's time?
There you go. Yeah.
Right.
I'd name the field timestamp to be clearer. Date seems to me that it should only be a calendar date.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hang on. The publication date, what should that be called?
Well, the year and the date are separate things, because often things only come out. So year, you would expect to just have a year, BC or BCE, whereas the date, you basically, the form, the sensible form in this day and age is to go reverse date order. So it'd be 2010 sort of dash.
That's not.
No, we're right, because if you put it in like that, I would say it's not a helpful example, because that people will assume that is the correct method. I would put it in the format with least like.
Okay, let me just unbold this. Right, so the only thing we're focusing on is what should be here and what should be here, and how should they relate? Because now we have at book, and then we have at book here. How should we relate the two, and how should we label them? There's got to be a way that someone who is, as someone said recently, someone who is not very interested in visual meta, but they're going to implement it because their boss tells them to. They're looking at just a few examples. What's a really clear way for us to say?
They shouldn't both be at book. That's conflating the field descriptions with the actual record. You could have book hyphen description or book hyphen format. Maybe book hyphen format would make even more sense to me. And then at books, and then the system could automatically look for whatever thing dash format to find the format of the corresponding record.
Well, okay.
So document format and document.
Regarding the date, will there be any conflict with the US format, because they tend to put the number after the month?
But that's the whole point. This bit here is supposed to specify the format. So you should be able to put anything you want, but you really here, you should say the way it's done.
Okay, so what it should be is it should be the year, the double digit month, the double digit day, and the time.
No,
Because anything else is just, we've learned this so many times already in the data field. Just writing it in the format you've got there is just wrong.
Okay, so are
Can
you
it just be a new field for time and one for date?
but guys, on the hang on, Raphael, on the question of what Mark said. So Mark, are you saying that people should not be allowed to specify the date format? That should be locked and they should just adhere to it?
Well, I'm saying if your example of what you expect, bearing in mind that people don't follow the rules anyway, is that you put it with year, month, day, double digit, because you want to make it unambiguous. And so for instance, doing year, month, day gets around the US and Philippines versus most others. And there are other year formats too, but so that gets around that. And the normal convention in most systems that I've seen is just, at least at the level where you're writing stuff like this, is that you do year, month, day, time zone, universal time zone, hours, minutes, seconds, and those are always done with colons in between. You don't have to put seconds in and stuff, but because that allows, there are lots and lots of systems then know how to put that into a sort of date time field, and they can do all sorts of calculations and stuff on it. So it's a really
People might even use star dates.
Sorry?
Some people might even use Star Trek star date format.
Oh yes, or the long Mayan calendar, or some Klingon system.
Okay, but the point, although you're being very helpful, and it's correct what you're saying, Mark, you're also missing the point. The point is that this is a format. It could be Klingon, it could be whatever. You're given a suggestion for a very good one because it's robust. I agree with you. Mm-hmm. But what I need from you guys is, how can we make it clear in a way that looks professional and right for a programmer who is just about to implement this, can understand, first of all, that this is the formatting of that. Have we got it enough by saying document format and then documents? Or should we not do it in the curly things? Should we do it in a different way? I just need a consensus to make sure I'm not making it.
Right. Well, what I've suggested is that the point is what you've got in certainly in BibTeX terms, there is a bit confusing. So inside document format, I would have a thing saying description equals, and then everything you've got in there would be the value of that description. And you can put curly brackets around it.
You're talking about here.
So on the next, so if you just humor me for a moment, go to document format at the top, put a new line break after that, type description space equals space, and then open a curly bracket, and then put a curly bracket after is a response to about 10 lines down. No, don't type that. Go to the line that says this, yes, at the end of there, type a curly bracket. No, not there, not there, not there, the line above. No, after response to, after response to, okay. And in BibTeX, so now you've got that, the document format tag sort of description now has one field in it called description, and it has a value, and inside that you can then you can make a more human list. I'm not suggesting that's the best way, but that's a way that's consistent with the format of BibTeX in general.
So if we do this, we call this book, just for fun. Could be article, right? And then we do description of fields below. I want this stuff has to be superhuman, right? Mm-hmm. Description of fields below, all the stuff you said, and then do we just go straight to Dave Miller?
Well, if we're going there, I'd recommend that we could also then include an actual formal grammar. So right after description of fields below, you could then have parsing expression grammar equals, and then have the totally strict programmer interpretable grammar. And also there are now parser generators for almost every language that can take standard peg notation and turn them into a parser automatically.
Okay.
Add
Peter, I'm not
grammar block.
My brain's not
automatically generate code.
My brain is not ready to receive that, Peter. Can you please hold that just for a minute?
Okay.
Oh, thank you. So I'm going to unbold now because we have solved the date problem to this extent, right? So I need to know this bit between this document is response to and author Dave Millard. What should we have?
No, if you go back to what you heard, you could call it something at example, open curly bracket. And in your description field, you could say an example of this is in the at example
But
below.
this is not an example. This is the actual data.
Well, in which case it would be whatever
That book.
data type you think is relevant, but it needs to go.
No, but hang on a second. The at book, doesn't that include this, all of this?
Right, where this is getting confusing is that I thought the thing that you're now calling book was the description of what this is all about.
Yeah, I'm trying to make this as absolutely simple and clear because
Well,
remember,
it's making it more complicated because
one thing.
it's not clear now whether the limitation is between the book bit. I mean, if push comes to shove, don't have any of this out of formatting, just literally, where you started the visual meta is have, I don't know, a line of hashes or something. You just said, and write it in plain English using ASCII text. So avoiding anything that the lowest level sort of digital parser is going to cope. In other words, don't put in fancy symbols or emojis or anything like that. And it's something that works on a sort of 1960s computer character set.
Okay, this is very interesting. Very interesting. So before the at visual meta start, people are obliged to have a huge long paragraph I call just description. That's the one that says, the old text is actually like this. This is the text. Visual meta is based on the academic big type citation of information and latex, blah, blah, blah. The way reader software is blah, blah, blah. It's a human text describing it. So what I think you're leaning towards, which I'm very much liking, is before at visual meta starts, after at description, we have that separate and we have it in plain English language. So we have
and you could always use the bit you've got at the moment to say, if you don't understand what visual meta is, look all the way at the end, so just so that you don't have to scroll through it once you know what it is before you get to the visual meta. But that's a nicety.
Now, I think what we might be conflating here is that you're associating all the metadata with the record entry. Now, that would be insane if you did it for every single book. Let's say you had 50 books, you wouldn't want to have each book wrapped in that description of the book and then in that book. What I could see happening, which would make a lot more sense, would be if I'm copying a book in Author, we put on the clipboard the at book record, and also we put the at description corresponding to whatever we just stuck on the clipboard, so that something pasting it in can get both the record and the metadata about that kind of a record, but it would only get one copy of the metadata about that kind of record. Say you had 5 books you copied at once, you'd get one book description block on the clipboard as the book description, plus the 5 separate book entry items on the clipboard. So if you already had it, you wouldn't need to paste it in, but it would be there as extra data, because that's one thing I love about the clipboard, being able to take different formats of data.
yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. But I think
We only need the field descriptions once in a document, is what I'm saying. We don't want to have that replicated more than once.
no. It isn't more than once. This is only for citing this document. It's not about the reference section.
Okay, but what if we were also citing that document? If you had at cite this document, if you had at cite that document, in other words, if there are 2 documents, what I see here is just a reading on reading as a single document with.
That's solved as how if someone copies from a document, as you said, I don't care about that now, right? Because you're right. Sorry, hang on. It's just annoying with that big toolbar. So let me just try to view this properly. Right. So when someone cites from this document, this bit will go to the clipboard as BibTeX. And what I really want help with from you guys is, I think this is what you said, Peter, this bit should go as well to describe how this is formatted. But I guess it should be in a computer readable way, right? So when you,
see the visual meta text,
sorry?
it could just be that verbatim text right there that's highlighted now.
Hmm.
Yeah, so, okay, so this is the first step.
You want an open curly bracket after BibTeX when there's at formatting of how to, just before you forget.
And I think to make it clear, there should be 2 sample documents in that, so you can see how the 2 documents would relate to the metadata. But somebody just looking at this natively would think that if they were having that document, they'd have to add a block that says formatting at that document, just they had at formatting how to cite this document. They think they have to have a at formatting how to cite that document and then have at that document, which would be redundant and it wouldn't be what we want.
I sense part of the problem here is I think we're conflating 2 descriptive needs. What one is the thing of saying, what is this at all? You know, why am I even looking at it? Because maybe I've never seen metadata at all. And then the stuff that you've just been showing us, which explains that now you know what it is, this is how you use it. And I think trying to smush the 2 together is probably one of the things that's giving us some difficulty at the moment.
Yeah, all I want is the visual meta, if it is American format or British format calendar, I want there to be a way that a human, maybe a computer, but a human can see, in this document, it's time, minutes, and 24-hour format followed by day, month, and all of that stuff. When you cite this document, that is it. And it's insane that that's so complicated. But of course, that is the inherent issue of what we're dealing with.
Well, time and people's names are inherently complicated.
Yeah, they really are. But that's why it should be 24-hour format. That's useful.
I can't begin to tell you all the ways my name has been mangled over the years.
Could imagine.
I mean, the odd thing.
Made it look Japanese. Don't ask me how, but they managed to mangle it into looking Japanese.
I mean, you know, the thing about the 24 thing is I think a lot of people adopt on the grounds that no one actually uses it, you know, in their everyday speech, but they all know what it means, and it's the easiest way of getting around many of the everyday inconsistencies that we hit up on.
Mark, in Norwegian, you say 1700 hours.
Well, that's fine.
You don't say 5 o'clock. You say 1700. So
Yeah, but this speaks to the inherent complexity of just that. There's some wonderful. There are a couple of pages on GitHub of just if you thought this was similar, but it speaks to things. So you can't just you sort of elide away
guys,
by that.
A way to tell people how the data is formatted, please.
Well, you've done that. You give them. You tell them to do a
Mark,
to use.
Can you see my screen, Mark?
I can.
Okay. So the thing is, it's not completely obvious how to do this because there are different sections, right? So the question is, should we have it all in one, where I think you have solved that, where the bit that we're doing is kind of hidden in a way, so it'll be parsed out by BibTeX readers, so just see that as a field that's not relevant? Or should we have a normal plain BibTeX section followed by a fancy one? I think we've gotten to the point where we can delete this and only have the BibTeX with that additional top text. Is that correct? Am I interpreting it right?
Yes, I mean, well, the only reason to be doing your documentation in a BibTeX format is if you think that needs to be parsed by something. If you stick it out, you could deliberately choose to place it outside the visual meta wrapper, or specifically within the arrange the visual meta wrapper so that it's clear that the description is the description and not part of the visual meta. I'm not sure that putting the description as something that parses as BibTeX helps you any. It just makes it harder for humans who don't understand BibTeX to read.
Mark,
So it would be easier to put outside.
we're already over time today, and so here's the thing: when it comes to the issue of human readable visual meta, it is not designed for your everyday reader to pick up and read any more than this is. You know, that normal stuff in the book. That's no more or less human readable. Some
I
of
always
it,
go to that page first.
yeah, I mean, no one reads it. Everybody skips past it. No one's going to reprint originally published New York, Simon and Schuster, ISBN 13. No one reads that. What
I read it. I'm an outlier, but I read it.
It's there for librarians primarily.
It does not count for the people in this call, because I'm sure we all do.
The point is that it's not designed for reading for its own sake. It is designed for reading in a specific type of reading, right? So, yeah.
Well, I think that's the problem you're doing, is you want to write, you basically want to write it in plain prose, but you want it to have structure. And the things that you want to have structure are actually inherently complicated. So
it doesn't have to be plain prose. The target reader for this is a programmer or a technical person. No student is going to read this ever, unless they're actually studying this, right? It is purely someone else implementing a reader or authoring package that, you know, in 1,000 years or in 1 year, they should be able to say, I understand what these fields mean, and I can parse them. Programmers are people too.
So,
Some of them.
And we'd want a formal grammar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the reason we're starting with visual meta is because it's approachable, but issues with specific dates and names are real. Mark, this is your fault. You're the one who spent the last few years telling me about them.
Well, I think, but what I see is, in the sense, I think you've been given the answer, but you're not happy with the answer, which is the answer is sort of, you feel it's too complicated for the style you wish to use. And I don't mean that. I don't mean that confrontationally. It's so if the person reading this is expecting, if we're expecting them, well, maybe we need to make a statement that starts is the expectation of the user of this is someone who understands something about data structures or is a programmer or something. And then it's more reasonable to go into something and the sort of things that Peter's, I thought, quite well described about, you know, having program definition stuff, because they've got to go away, you know, future self, thousands of years hence, finds this wonderful artifact and needs some handholds to get to something to help them unlock what it is. So we don't really need to explain it for the general public, which makes it easier to use more precise language, because we don't have to use vernacular. We can use things because there's a reasonable expectation that the audience, obviously, we're making an expectation that they understand the language, the human language we're using, in terms of, you know, English as opposed to Russian or something. But we don't have to worry about whether they understand what programming is. And I think thus far we probably tripped up on the fact that we're probably trying to make it too approachable to a wider group.
Right. So in this, so what we are now deeming is that I'm just going to call this BibTeX. And this is core BibTeX with the description. So I don't need any of this. So we have, so as long as this is in the beginning of the document somewhere, you're happy that that looks. The only problem I have is these things are separated. I don't think they should be separated. Because
why do you think that? That's a bit, it's not clear.
The reason I think that is this field stuff only refers to this. It doesn't refer to anything else lower down. So if something has a different date format or author format or whatever, that's not relevant. This is only for this.
That's why I was using the @where notation, because each different format would be its own @where, and then anything following it would track back to that. Then you're not having to invent a new name each time you're having a format change. You just simply signify that whatever you see after this until you hit another where block, and it's sort of a tag minimization approach. But I think it works in this context because we don't have any nesting in terms of the formats. We have one kind of a format, everything in that format, another kind of a format. There isn't any hierarchy to confuse us. So we can use tag minimization without a problem there. And then we avoid having to also invent a name on formatting this document, formatting a foo document, formatting a bar document. It's just simply where, here what the fields mean, here what the fields mean.
Yeah,
Right.
but what you've lost now in that top group is that isn't now because you've removed the key value pair structure
Yeah,
of BibTeX, which now makes it confusing to read because
I know. I'm just saying, isn't there, this is just to remind me to say, isn't there a comment type thing for BibTeX where you can write stuff that is not parsed?
it is it the, I think is it the @ symbol? I can't remember. You can, it's LaTeX. It'll be, what's the LaTeX comment character? Peter,
Percent.
sorry?
Percentages. to LaTeX
Percent,
comment.
yeah. So %, % escapes to the end of the line.
So could
But
we,
I'm not sure it does. No, I'm not sure it does it inside a BibTeX object.
yeah, but that's fine.
That'd probably blow up half the BibTeX processors out there.
Yeah, so I would not put it inside a wrapper like that and not put an @ sign. So basically what you want to do
How
is
about
you
this?
want, sorry?
How about this?
No, I see what you're trying to do, but I think you're approaching it as a sort of from the writing, the graphical, from the human writing sense. And what we actually want is something as unambiguous. So I think it helps to view it as a coding thing and then make it as.
Well, that's fine. I'm happy to do that, but I'm just trying to figure out what that is.
Now you want to keep that because that's your example.
No, it's not an example. It's the actual thing.
Well, that's fine. Okay, well, you then don't want that line you just put in because that's now closed the book, which is
Yeah, lose the closed brace there. That's it.
So braces should always, in BibTeX, braces should always match.
No, I understand that. That was a mistake. So
Yeah,
thank
okay.
you for pointing that out.
Um,
But can't this stuff, I mean, another thing we could just do, because let me ask you this, is there a programmatic way where we can specify date is time and year, month, blah, blah, blah? Or is it just going to remain human? Because if it just remains human, might as well just have it like this. Why even put it inside the BibTeX when it's not the BibTeX? Just have it as text before, because this is where the parsing starts. So this is just for the human who is having to make sure the library fixes.
so, well, in other words, what that implies to me is you want a sort of possibly a double wrapper. You want something that when someone stumbles across this, and they're leafing through it, or either on screen or in the paper form, or transcribed onto a rock face somewhere, that it says, right, it tells you you've got to the visual meta part. Then within that, there's a bit that's saying this is the explanatory part, and then you bit that says this is the real data part, and then it's unambiguous as to what's going on where. So in other words, your book wants to come after a marker within the overall structure that delimits the description and the how to deal with this from the data. And my sense is you might, and Peter will probably, I suspect, have a better view on this than me, but you might use, effectively two wrap within the overall visual meta. You have one wrap around all the descriptive stuff. So if you need to have examples that look like real BibTeX, it's in there, but it's separated from the data.
I don't want any examples. I mean, this is what I want. And I think you agree that this is what we want. But the thing is, so here's a bit saying what these values mean, right? So we just need to put this in an elegant way. So when I show this to ACM or whoever, they don't say, this is funny. You know, they say that that's a reasonable representation.
Well, what I'm thinking now is that maybe what we want is to take the structure of a parsing expression grammar and replace its notation with a human-friendly notation. So if we use little bits of natural language as the markers for the different parsing expression grammar components, then it would be much clearer. I'll play with it. Maybe by Friday, I can have a little example blurb for you to take a look at. It's kind of hard to describe. I know in my head what I want it to look like. And it's been one of those projects I've had on the back burner for a long time anyhow. So I'll see if I can find some time to play with it. No guarantees, because I have elder care issues that pop up from time to time. And actually, I've got to be leaving now to get ready to take my mom for an appointment anyhow. So, but that's what I'll work on until next meeting.
I'm happy to see any drafts if it helps, Peter.
Okay, great idea. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Okay, thanks, Peter.
I'll shoot something along to you as soon as I have it starting to take shape, because you'll be able to give the most intelligent feedback on that point for us.
Right, yeah, I'm looking at the time. I have to go as well, but I'm greatly appreciative, and I think we're making some progress. Yeah, and also, Raphael, I'm talking to Vint on Wednesday about some of the issues with marketing and stuff, so I'll keep you up to date.
Okay, bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye.
See you Friday.
Bye.
Bye-bye, have a nice week.
Raphael, should we plan a meeting tomorrow, actually, to go through some of the marketing stuff?
Yeah, you can find the time that you find the slot for you, because I'm pretty much free during the mornings.
Okay, how about we start at, okay, so now it's 20 past the hour. What time is it for you?
Around 5, that would be after lunch for me. Yeah, that would be good. That would be around 1:15.
No, okay, but let's say 1. So that would be 5. So see you tomorrow at 1 your time and 5 my time.
Yeah, it would be exactly this time right now, pretty much.
No, I'm talking about 18 minutes ago.
Okay, so 18 minutes. Okay, 1 p.m. for me. That's fine. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys, and thanks, Mark. This is heavy stuff, but
No, it's fine. It's always a bit Blundstone to start with. It'll get better. It will get better.
okay, wonderful. Bye for now.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Have a nice week.
You too.